Good afternoon. Hello, and a very warm welcome. And thank you all for joining us for our roundtable, Protecting Whales and the Role of the Yachting Community. It's good to have you all here today, wherever you are in the world. Please join me now in welcoming our today's panelists. And I'm going to introduce each one so you know a little bit about the background. Let me begin with Vienna Eluteri. Vienna is a sustainability scientist and anthropologist, and she serves as vice president at the Water Revolution Foundation. She's CEO and senior advisor at the Saudi Red Sea Authority, and she drives transformational initiatives for sustainable maritime practices. She's just been awarded the Trailblazers Women Yachting Award. Congratulations, Vienna. Next, the other gentleman we have on the panel is John de Parsenaire. Now, John is Director of Government Affairs and Sustainability for the Viking Marine Group. He oversees initiatives related to efficiency, sustainability, and advocacy in manufacturing. Key projects he's worked on include plastic recycling programs and sustainable fuels launching in 2025, and participation in native oyster restoration. Now, John leads efforts on marine engine emissions, fishing regulations, ocean access, and marine mammal interactions. He also chairs the Whale and Vessel Safety Task Force, which develops technology-based solutions to minimize vessel impacts on protected marine species, particularly whales. Hello, John. Let us also welcome Amy Witt. Now, Amy is a senior marine scientist with over 15 years of experience in coastal environmental management, marine conservation, and ocean policy. She's the founder and CEO of Azura Consulting, and she's led marine mammal research, environmental compliance, and conservation initiatives worldwide. She serves clients across federal state agencies, the oil and gas sector, and offshore renewable energy. She's extensive expertise in marine species monitoring, abundance modeling, and environmental impact and compliance. Her work integrates research, policy development, and science communication to advance sustainable ocean management and marine conservation. It's good to have you here, Amy. And finally, Matthew Zimmerman, who we all need no introduction to. Matthew is CEO of Farsounder. He's creator of advanced underwater solutions through their 3D forward-looking sonar. Now, this sonar generates a three-dimensional image ahead of every vessel. He founded the company more than 23 years ago. His focus is on growing the company's reach and development, and he leads his team with a passion for marine safety and the sustainability of the ocean ecosystems. One of his goals are to create safer oceans, and he participates in the IHO's crowdsourced bathymetry working group. So, let me say, this panel is interactive. Please do post your comments and questions, and I will do my very best to get to those throughout the talk, but also after. We have a little section at the end where we can answer all your questions. And now, let's go to that first question if everybody's ready. The question probably everybody really wants to know is, what does it mean that whales are endangered, and what are they endangered by?
Thank you, Jill, for that great introduction. I think it's pretty clear we all know that over the years we have been hunting the great whales of all species nearly to their extinction. An IMF study a few years ago estimated that there were about 4 to 5 million great whales in our oceans before the age of whaling. And today there's only about a little more than 1 million. So dramatic decrease in those populations. And not only are these creatures amazing to see, but they provide a lot of, unbeknownst to a lot of people out there, they provide a lot of positive environmental impact to the oceans and the earth. So they're important not only from a interesting species point of view, but also from an environmental point of view.
Everyone realizes that whales are endangered, and one of the key issues is, what are the leading causes of their deaths? I mean, who would feel confident enough to actually address that?
We do know that some of the leading cause of death and injury in a lot of these large whale species is ship strikes from vessels and also entanglement in gear, particularly fishing gear. Here in the U.S., where I'm based out of and located, our one of our main conservation challenges is with the North Atlantic right whale. This species, is critically endangered at this point, and from all the data that's been collected, it looks like there's two main causes of death, and it's ship strikes and entanglement in fishing gear. They have a very limited range, just basically along the U.S., the east coast of the U.S. and northeast Canada. And they are very near shore, which is unfortunate because their near shore habitat puts them in danger of ship traffic. As the ships are, it kind of creates a bottleneck. So, ships are all in the ocean. You think whales are all scattered throughout the ocean, but that's not always the case, particularly with this species. They really are very near shore, and they migrate up and down the coast. They use the coastline for their calving areas and their feeding areas. So unfortunately, that puts them in the path of large ships and also small recreational vessels that stay along the coastline. So you get this bottleneck of these ships coming in to ports, and the right whales are also trying to go past the ports, and so that really puts them in the path of that kind of obstacle. Um, Also, with the right whale, unfortunately, when they are um, spooked or scared by something, they tend to surface, which is not the best when you need to avoid a ship. Unfortunately,
I've always heard that they were called right whales because they were the right whales to hunt. They're stupid, and they sit the surface as you get near them. So
they do.
I don't know whether that's
Yeah.
the actual true origin of their name, but certainly those characteristics do make them at risk for endangerment from entanglement as well as vessel ship strike. Uh,
Right, because of course, yeah, the fishing gear is also, of course, more coastal on the continental shelf, and that's where the ships are coming into port. Um, so yeah, this is a really big challenge, and that's one of the main issues that I work with as well. Um,
One of the amazing statistics that I think really drives home the story of the right whales is there's only about 370 of them left alive, and my understanding is that there's only about 70 breeding females. So it's going to take a real long time to regenerate. I wonder if
Yeah.
anyone here knows about uh, the breeding habits of them. Like, how quickly can, if we are able to protect them, how quickly can they regenerate their populations?
That's a good question, and unfortunately, what we know about the right whale is that they only reach sexual maturity, about 10 years of age, which is a long time. Um, they have a gestation period of 1 year. In a healthy population, they should be having calves every 3 to 5 years, but it looks like this particular population is having calves now 6 to 10 years apart. So that number of reproductively active females is really important, and the fact that we think it's only about 70 animals now, um, is is really a problem for this population.
You mentioned you're talking about one specific species here, I think, but
Mhm.
aren't all whales at risk?
Absolutely. If we look to the Mediterranean, the Eastern Mediterranean sperm whales, they're estimated to only be between 200 and 250 of those animals left as well. And it's believed that ship strike is also leading cause of death for them. And there's actually been some great initiatives by some large shipping companies to actually adjust the routes of the cargo ships to reduce the overlap with the breeding grounds in the Eastern Mediterranean. MSC, for example, has really done some great work. It adds a minor amount of time to their transits, but it's had a huge impact on protecting those whales. Amy, you also mentioned earlier about the right whales living close to shore. Last year, I was out on the northeast coast of the United States doing some work with some humpbacks. And one of the things I've been learning about them is they've been moving closer to shore on the East Coast as well. I'm not sure anyone knows quite why, but their food sources seem to be moving inshore. So if you think about a hungry predator trying to get something to eat, they're going to follow the food.
I've had a question drop in, Matthew, which is quite interesting, into our question section, which is, do underwater seismic surveys have an effect on whales? And if so, what are the effects? I mean, could they be contributing? Or could they be endangering whales?
I think that there are a lot of scientists around the world that strongly believe that loud, low-frequency sounds have a negative impact on the great whales. So sound in the sea is a huge, huge topic. Anything that uses a pressure wave to make a measurement is some sort of sonar, and these seismic sonar systems, they're making real loud, low-frequency noises, either with air gun arrays or even explosions in some cases. And those are within the hearing ranges of the great whales. And low frequencies with loud sound levels travel a really long way. So whether it is damaging the hearing temporarily or permanently, making them change behaviors like abandoning eating in the area or moving someplace else, I think it's a pretty strong conclusion from a lot of scientists around the world that has a pretty negative impact on them. Far sounder sonars are also a sonar. We're also making noises in the water, but we're much quieter, much higher frequencies, and we've really ensured that our systems don't produce the same types of sounds that could cause acoustic harassment, either temporarily or permanently. And that's really important to us.
Yeah, good answer. Thank you for that. It was quite a thorough answer too, and I hope that answered the question. I think that came in. Let's see if anybody else has any other questions. I mean, there's a question I want to ask, and that is, why actually do we care so much about whales? Shall we? I mean, Vienna, would you like to jump in here and answer that question? Why are we caring so much about whales? Why is it so much on our focus? And why are we hosting this podcast today about that? Tell us a bit more.
First of all, I would like to say that those are really incredible creature. So it's a gentle giant, so iconic species, and this is one of the thing I think we should take into consideration. There is also a kind of emotional and cultural importance of this species, and the relationship we feel we have with them. And I'd love really to explore much more the wonder of the intrinsic importance of these amazing creatures from different perspective. But today, to really answer this question, I want to also to highlight something very important, that is the so-called whale carbon footprint. We need to understand that the whale population is an essential asset for the ocean in order to capture CO2. And the health of the marine ecosystem rely a lot on this, on their habitat. And it's also very logical. Before starting investigating a bit more on this interesting subject, it's also logical to understand that those are big creature. Where they are there, it's because the entire food chain is there. So the phytoplankton, the most the littlest creature in the ocean together throughout the entire food chain is there. So where the whales are means that the area is really, really important from many others reason why, biological reason why. And today, more than, and I will close this year by saying that today the whales, it's considered, the population of whales is considered an amazing asset against the climate change, because they are considered kind of emerging blue carbon assets, because they have the potential, but probably we will investigate much more this, we go much deeper later on this subject, but it's they can capture even more than 30 times the value of CO2 of a tree on the same lifetime period. So there are so many aspects related to the importance of the whales in the ocean that we really should start to better understand, which is this kind of biological and ecological value of whales.
I think I learned something incredible there. For me, whales have always been mythical creatures and creatures of stories. And obviously with Seakeepers, we do a lot of projects around whales, but I've just learned something there, Vienna. Thank you so much.
There's a great term that I learned recently, Jill, called whale pump. And that is the whales dive down to eat some of their food near the bottom of the seafloor. And then they come up to the surface to breathe. And I have little kids, so they love this because they poop out nutrients. Their poop becomes the food of stuff living up near the surface. So they're bringing nutrients from down deep up towards the surface. And that is part of what phytoplankton rely on. And that IMF article that I mentioned a little while ago, they have this great quote. They said, at a minimum, even if 1% increase in phytoplankton productivity thanks to whale activity would capture hundreds of millions of tons of additional CO2 a year, this would be equivalent to the sudden appearance of 2 billion mature trees. Imagine the impact over the average lifespan of a whale of more than 60 years. That is pretty phenomenal. And additionally, when they die, they fall down to the seafloor. A bunch of critters eat them. But a lot of that carbon in their bone structures and in the critters down there gets captured down below. We're here talking about the yachting community nominally, even though this topic is really for everyone. And there's someone that probably a lot in the yachting community know, Malcolm Jacotine. He calculated that it would take about 150,000 great whales to sequester the amount of carbon dioxide, CO2 that was emitted by super yachts in 2018. So that sounds like a big number, 150,000 great whales. But if we think about going from where we are today at 1 or 1.3 million back towards 4 or 5 million, that's kind of a small number. So there's a lot that these whales can do. And like I said, when they do die, another great word to learn, Jill, whale fall. Their carcasses come down to the seafloor and provide nutrients and a habitat. And the circle of life continues for those organisms down there.
Circle of life, Matthew. I love that. That really appeals to my Disney side of my personality. I've actually just got a comment which has come in saying the value of a whale, according to the IMF and based on the contribution of the whale to carbon sequestration and ecotourism, is $2 million. Now that's quite remarkable, wouldn't you say? And on that note, one thing we haven't touched on is the cultural and tourism significance of a whale. We've been talking about the environmental aspect, but a lot of countries do trade on the tourism value of a whale. I think that actually takes us nicely into our next subject. How can a vessel either avoid or find a whale, and what technologies are out there to help that process? I think John, because you've been very quiet here and I'm going to drag you into this conversation, let's talk about your role in the Whale and Vessel Safety Task Force and perhaps dynamic management areas. Let's hear what you've got to say around this.
Great. Yeah, thank you for the question. And like Matt said, I've been learning a lot too. So I've been enjoying just being quiet and listening to all the interesting facts that I'm learning. So yeah, I think this is an issue. I think we've gone through and clearly recognized that whales play an important part in the ecosystem as a keystone species in many regions. They have intrinsic ecological and environmental value that we all want to see them prosper and have healthy, sustainable populations. And I think the challenge with that is as those populations increase, a basic function of how this works is that the risk of strikes does get higher. And because, as you have greater whale densities, you have greater vessel traffic, the risk of encounters can go up. And so I think this is why we need to think about this from a really innovative and creative way. So I think your question is really a good one because we want to think about how we can really almost future proof this the success that we're trying to have from the conservation of the great whales. And this is why from a boating standpoint, we really think technology is going to play a really critical role in this. For us, for the boats that we build, speed is a really it's a really important factor, both from the design and marketing aspect of our vessels. Most of them are used for recreational activities, primarily fishing. So we tend to need speed to reach the fishing grounds, but also to operate in these favorable weather windows. And so speed allows us to fish when it's most opportune and not be out during storms, as opposed to like a commercial vessel, which is designed to sort of withstand, anything the ocean can throw at it in most cases. But our boats aren't. And so because of that, we really do rely on speed a lot. In fact, a lot of our hull designs and engineering work is really designed around efficiency and speed. With that, though, if that's not a tool that we're going to fall back on to mitigate our risk of vessel strikes, we're going to have to come up with other ones. And that's where we think technology is going to be really critically important. We all know Mac's company, forward-looking sonar is one that is making great strides in terms of below surface detection. I think that one has a lot of opportunities for both the commercial and for the yachting sector. Up at surface detection, we have systems on our boats, from visual and thermal cameras. So a lot of this computer vision, you can have running real time while the vessel operator is, looking ahead of the vessel. You can have these systems running real time. And if you pair them with artificial intelligence, which has the capabilities of classifying and annotating objects that it sees in that feed, it becomes a really, really powerful tool. So an operator can get an alert almost automatically if there is a whale that's at the surface within the field of path. So these are some of the things that we're really exploring. I think one of the really interesting things about the recreational boating sector in particular is we bring a lot to the table. So innovation, I think, is one. We're always looking to make boating safer, avoid hitting objects on the water. We also provide a significant amount of data. So if you think about the role of AI in this whole conservation challenge, which we think is very powerful, if you start to tap into the data that comes from the recreational and boating sector, I mean, it becomes a significant asset that can help to train, to improve these AI systems, and then sort of have a positive feedback loop.
We've got somebody who's chipped in, and I think probably this question would be good for you, is that, since whales are suffering from vessel strikes, how many vessels per year experience whale strikes and resulting damage? I mean, that's something we haven't touched on. We're talking right now from the whale aspect, but you perhaps could talk from the vessel side that, how many boats are actually colliding and having serious damage because of the impact?
Yeah, and it varies from year to year. So I believe 2023, we did not have any confirmed vessel strikes of North Atlantic right whales. I'm speaking about the right whale now. But unfortunately, in 2024, we had, I think we're at 4 right now, or 5, not exactly sure. But those numbers are significant when you're talking about a low population size. And as others had mentioned, especially when you're thinking about the vulnerability of a mother and calf pairs, I mean, that's, any loss of those is really critically concerning. But it is a safety issue, absolutely. Large vessels, large ocean-going vessels may interact with a large whale and may not suffer any damage or even recognize that the event had occurred. Typically on the yachting side, when that happens, there is significant damage to the vessel, and it can be very dangerous. We've had we had one incident back in 2022 where a recreational sport fish boat ran into a North Atlantic right whale in Florida, and that boat sunk soon after. So it can be very, very, very dangerous. And so we do have a real incentive not only to look at this from a conservation standpoint, but for us, we always want to make boating safer. And so there's a real confluence of innovation and desire to address this from both a boating safety and a conservation perspective.
If this happens, unless the boat sinks and it's very obvious what happened, but a lot of these kind of interactions and damage to boat may not get reported even through their insurance, because of that factor as well. So I think a lot of it, we just really we don't know. Like I said, on our side, we see the animals, the right whales. Like I said, some of them migrate up and down the East Coast. We do regular visual surveys to detect them. It's kind of the old school traditional method, trying to figure out how many are there, and to find any potential damage or entanglement. And this, we use these very large binoculars on ships, to do these type of surveys from the vessel. And then we can go far offshore, from a ship and be able to do this. But for right whales, we particularly use aircraft to do aerial visual surveys. Since the right whales tend to be, relatively near shore, aircraft aerial surveys allows us a quicker method to be able to do the systematic surveys to detect North Atlantic right whale, like in that photo right there. So we're able to take photos of them. They all have these callosity patterns on their heads that are distinct to the individual. So it's kind of like their fingerprint. So we're able to take photos and identify individual right whales. There's a whole catalog of these individuals that researchers try to keep track of. So that helps us kind of know how many are there. And then because we're doing a systematic kind of line transect survey when we're looking for these animals, that data is then used to actually do modeling to get an abundance estimate for this population, for the species. So those are kind of the old school methods that are still being used, to this day, and are still tried and true methods. And also, the visual part of it, if you know what to look for, even if you are a crew on a yacht, and you're trained to know what to look for with your eyes, it gives you another way to just, if it's daytime, you can help look and locate these whales if you know what to look for. So that's still a method that can be used in tandem with the IR and the sonar and all these other methods that are definitely coming up and becoming more popular to use.
Speaking of old
Thank
school,
you, Amy. Yeah, you need a combination of both. And I think another thing we need to consider is something that Vienna can speak to, which is about important marine mammal areas. Vienna, if we know where we're going, we know what we're looking for. What have you got to say about that?
Absolutely. Thank you, Jill, for this important question. This is just a very, very key topic regarding both sides, conservation and the way we can better interact and we can better understand what to do and what not to do. Because one of the key challenge in order to let the whales be back into the ocean and reproduce and have a larger population is about their habitats. So what I have learned from especially from the IUCN Marine Mammals Task Force co-chaired by Professor Giuseppe Notarbartolo di Sciara and Professor Eric Hoyt. I've been working very, very close to them in the last 15 years, I would say. I was trying to get the yachting community closer to some scientific key topics important for marine mammals, for marine life in general, and marine mammals in specifically. And we identified of course, from the scientific point of view, but then really adopted by the yachting community, specifically the super yachting community as a whole, the so-called important marine mammals area. And those are specific areas identified scientifically. And there are two main aspects of this important marine mammals area that I do consider really innovative and transformative tool for conservation and for marine life. Because on one hand, it's fully based, the knowledge that it's identified those areas is coming from the scientific knowledge, from the biological data we have related to the area. And second is the kind of process throughout which the important marine mammals area are identified and established, because they mobilize all the best knowledge available within the scientific community of a specific area. And those area are selected based on the criteria such as biological importance, species presence, vulnerability for some specific aspect of the activities that the marine mammals are performing in those specific area. And by doing this, the scientific community ensures that the protection of essential habitats and could really contribute to the health of the marine mammals population and the marine ecosystem. And let me add something from the yachting point of view, because why I think it's important for yachting or any kind of human activities on the ocean could be really key in order to help, and how the marine the IMMAs, the so-called IMMAs, could contribute, could be identified as an important tool in order to better interact with those areas, because they foster the sense of belonging and responsibility towards specific marine areas. And they also allows us to truly become kind of eyes on the sea.
Yeah.
And having maps on these areas, they are also integrated. Not also we support financially the realization, so to say, the workshop specifically to realize, to identify important marine mammals area, but we also integrate on board systems to help operators, captains, crew, as Amy was rightly saying, to be aware about the presence of the marine mammals, adopt appropriate behaviors, like reducing speed in sensitive zone and so on. But it means also to actively contribute to the observation of these animals and collecting valuable data. So many different positive effects, so to say. And that's why I think that the important marine mammals area are really key tools enabling real conservation, effective conservation.
It seems that whereas what we're bringing together here is the traditional, conventional methods, the knowledge of the areas you're in, and the new technology. And we can't move on from this till we discuss very briefly Far Sounder, because that's a technology which will allow you to see what's in front of you. Isn't that correct, Matthew? That's
correct, Jill. But I'd love to actually step back a moment. Obviously, my focus is on forward-looking sonar technology, but I see that is just one of the tools in a holistic approach. And that's why I'm so excited about organizations like the Waves Task Force. There are some vessels that have the need for forward-looking sonar. And, with products like ours, we're able to show operators what is underwater ahead of the vessel, including whales, whether it's a humpback or something else. In general, vessels don't want to hit stuff, whether it's a whale or a shipping container, rocks, corals. That's negative. But not every vessel has a far sounder due to cost and size requirements. But there are other technologies out there. There's thermal imaging, like John had talked about a little earlier in our conversation. And I know that the Waves Task Force was involved with some thermal imaging experiments previously. And far sounder sees above water sensors like camera systems and radar systems as being strong complements to real-time underwater detection systems. But there's a bigger picture besides just the vessels that have the real-time sensors on board. It goes back to understanding where the whales are, observations like Amy makes with the big binoculars or from airplanes, but also the community. There's community contributions like Whale Alert, which is a great app that's fairly active in the United States, starting to pick up traction in Europe, but could really be expanded globally. That allows not just official scientific organizations, but the general public to make citizen science observations. One question that people have often asked me is, if there's so few whales, why don't we just track them all and then know where they are and advertise them? And I think that's a fantastic question. One way to track whales is doing something called tagging, where you actually go out on a small boat, place on this tagger, which has a GPS to measure location. The fancy ones transmit up to satellite and say, here's this whale, and this is where the whale is. The problem is it's pretty invasive. You have a suction cup based system, which doesn't last very long, or you have like spiked barbs that like pierce into the body. That can cause infection, and particularly with the really small populations that are really endangered, we don't want to do anything that could push that reproductive cycle out longer. So Amy, you talked earlier about should be 3 to 4 years with North Atlantic great whales. We're now seeing 6 to 10 year reproduction cycles. We don't want to do things that can hurt them. And so John, maybe you can talk a little bit more about this with the Waves Task Force. I see far sounders role and thermal camera roles and visual observations from the community and even satellite observations working together to produce some sort of centralized data archive that can then be disseminated back out to other boaters. And John, that's really like what Wave's mission is. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, thanks for that, Matt. And really, the way you described it is exactly how we envision this working. Just because we know that there are limitations, as you mentioned, in terms of cost and size, not every vessel on the water is going to have the ability to install some of these advanced systems. It would be great if they could, but we know they can't. And so we run into this issue of scalability and limitations of detection capability based on certain size classes. And the way we can get around that is through communication. So if there is a vessel that is very well outfitted with advanced systems that has the capabilities of detection, we don't want that detection to reside solely on that vessel. We want to find ways of working to share that, send that to a centralized aggregator, and then looking at ways of sending that information back out to the fleet in a geo relevant sort of format. Like, we don't want to send out just blanket people with information. We want to make sure it's relevant for where they're operating at the time. And so how all that integration works is really, really critical. And, how, working with the marine electronics providers, the manufacturers that create the multifunction displays and the chart plotters, working together with them is really important because we want to have this information leave the vessel in a standardized format that all manufacturers can then receive and graphically display. And that becomes really, really, really important for a vessel operator. As they're operating in an area, there may not be something that they're picking up on their boat or even seeing visually. But if they get an alert that a boat 10 miles away or 5 miles away had just spotted a North Atlantic right whale. That may prompt that additional level of watch, bringing another set of eyes up into the wheelhouse to look out, but also even taking that action of perhaps even slowing down and sort of just operating in a more cautious manner. So the crowdsourcing part of this is really, really key. And again, it goes back to my point, utilizing this fleet, which is extensive, for both data collection, detection capabilities, but then also sharing that information, bouncing information around on the communication side as well.
I think that's really interesting because we're rounding back around here to say, how can the yachting community support endeavors? And I think you've just outlined that very clearly, which is technology, sharing the technology, working together, collaborating, all for the same cause. But there are other organizations which can get you involved in other ways, which is reporting whale observations. For instance, seakeepers who I'm with, we we support significant global marine mammal research, and we're working on things like whale acoustics in Alaska, or tagging and observing, or looking for humpback whale sightings in the UK. And I know that Vienna, the Water Revolution Foundation is another way that people can engage. It's if you have a technology, but also you can support science, and also you can be aware of what you're doing. Wouldn't you? I mean, you've talked to us about important marine mammal areas program. Is there anything else you'd like to briefly say? Because we are coming to the end, and I do want to open this up to questions.
Absolutely. I'm conscious of time, so I will say just few words regarding this, but thank you, Jill, for asking that. Yes, Water Revolution Foundation wants really to engage specifically with the yachting industry. First, because they have also the financial capability to invest in this kind of technologies, and I think that is really a key aspect, because we can better also understand not only the negative impact or to prevent some damages we could do, like whales collision and all these kind of things, but also to collect data in order to understand which is the value or some conservation frameworks, which is the kind of value. Sometimes, it's very difficult. For example, we are working at trying to understand how throughout IMAS specifically, how we are contributing to a better environment and to the population of whales on this area. And it's very difficult to collect the data to understand the previous and the status before IMA, and then after, when IMA is established. So you can see here the work that is done so far, but we still miss 5 different areas of the globe to really complete all the globe, all the ocean. And so again, in order to understand which is our negative impact, but also to evaluate which is the positive one, we need this kind of technology in order to collect data, and we need to be all together from all the different point of view in order really to work together in order to make the positive impact at scale that we need today.
How
So
much more data, Vienna, do you need? What's the scale that you're looking at, and how much more data do you need?
The kind of data, you mean?
Like, yeah, how big? How big an effort? What type of scale?
Yeah, it's an important scale. Even if I'm thinking now specifically to the ocean assets unit, so the so-called regenerative contribution units. No, you really need to be very, very specific in understanding which is, if the population is really growing, the kind of challenge they are facing, if there is something that really is working in order to get more an healthier marine environment, where the healthier habitats. And this is the kind of data we need in order to then to calculate and to understand which is the state of the art. So it's a big work. Again, we need to be all together, because it's having awareness. I always highlight that the awareness, it's fine, of course, it's important, but now we really need action. And specifically, each of us could do something, but the industry really need to take care about the responsibility on their own ecological footprint and trying to give back something to the ocean, specifically to whales.
Well,
And
there's a couple of efforts that I'm working on at Far Sounder and also with Amy at Azura that might be of interest and we can collaborate on. One is in the next release of our software, we're adding a whale and also floating trash observation button. We've been enabling our customers to crowdsource depth measurements and contribute anonymously to Seabed 2030. We're going to be piggybacking on that functionality to add whale observations. So we can certainly pass those observations on to you. And Amy and I are currently working on an online training class targeted towards the bridge crews and operators for basic whale spotting and identification and some information about how to operate safely. So,
Matthew, how do people listening today find out more about that and sign up?
well, on our website, just go to farcenter.com/whales. They can sign up to get notified for when that class is launched. Amy and I are furiously trying to finish that off. And it's really not our core business making training classes, but we want to share the knowledge that we have back to the community. But it also means if we can get observers with a little bit of training, and not just Far Center customers, but anyone, whether they are contributing through our software, through Whale Alert, or through any other method, it's a higher value observation. If it's coming from even a partially trained person, it's going to make...
We're right behind you on that. I mean, you're going to seakeepers, we're going to bring our fleets of vessels, private vessels around the world, where I think everybody either listening right now today or on this panel will do anything like this to support these endeavors. And, I think now really looking at the clock, I think it's time for me to turn to our audience, because I know they're out there. I can see the questions coming in. So I'm going to look at some of the questions we've been asked and bring, if that's okay with everyone. And let's see if we can provide some answers. Somebody here has asked, what are the ways to avoid whale strikes today? What measures have been implemented besides modifying shipping lanes, like the Mediterranean skipper Matthew mentioned? Matthew, which skipper were you mentioning there? This is Jennifer Smith's asked this question.
Which skipper am I talking about?
Yeah, the Mediterranean skipper that she mentioned. There was all about implementing, modifying shipping lanes.
MSC. So they're a large fleet operator. They have made modifications to their shipping channels, their shipping routes to help avoid that. Obviously, that has big impact to the vessels operating. Nobody wants to hit a whale. I've spoken to an oil tanker operator once that came into port with a whale draped across their bow. They didn't know they hit the whale until they came into port and saw it there. There was no damage to the vessel, but once they found out, the chief engineer said, "I know exactly when that happened because our fuel consumption spiked and we had no idea why. But the bulb on a large ship like that's really important hydrodynamically, and the bulb shape was deformed and it caused a big impact." Looking at the East Coast, there are areas that are either seasonally or dynamically set up to have reduced speed limits in those areas. Personally, I think that speed is a great tool, but it's not the only tool. And so if we just simply say slow down everywhere, that's going to have a dramatic impact.
Is there a safe speed? Is there a safe speed? Speed though, Matthew, because I'm getting those questions. What's the safe speed? What should I be doing? You've got the answer for that.
Well, NOAA, the National Marine Fisheries Service, has shown that speed reductions do reduce risk, but that's not the only factor that can reduce risk. Efforts like the Waves Task Force, better understanding where the whales are. It would be great to be able to say there are whales in these specific regions, slow down here or even avoid here, but there's nothing observed in these locations. And it doesn't mean there's no whales if there's been no observations.
Yeah.
There's certainly a lower chance. And so I feel like there's really a holistic solution, and Waves is one of the groups trying to solve that.
And so another question I'm getting here is about the U.S. Coast Guard, because they send warnings over the VHF radio during migrations of whales along the coastline. Is that working? Are the Coast Guards, John, would you say that that's a useful tool?
Well, what I can say is that in general, in the private or recreational birding sector, the outreach and information about management efforts specific to North Atlantic right whales coming from the federal agencies like NOAA and the Coast Guard have not been well received. The only time most people will recognize that there have been management measures in place is when they will get a notice of violation in the mail for exceeding a speed area. And so the outreach has been very poor, I think. And I think the federal agencies will recognize that it's also been poor as well. One of the things that we've been doing, and we had an interesting dynamic taking place this past summer. You talked about dynamic management areas, and those will pop up. They're temporary, voluntary zones, and they are triggered in response to either acoustic detection or visually detecting 3 or more North Atlantic right whales, and they will pop up this 15 by 15 box that's in place for about 2 weeks. And we had a couple of those pop up in the offshore canyons off of New York, New Jersey this past summer. That typically doesn't happen, but it was also during the height of the offshore fishing season when we have a lot of tournaments targeting marlin, tuna, things like that. And so there was a lot of interest and there's a lot of activity going on out there. And so what we did, we worked with tournament directors to make sure that they were informing their participants. We worked with our customers and our captains to make sure that they were aware of these areas. And what we found was that a message coming from the industry to the industry had a much different response and was taken with much more sincerity, I think, than a blanket message from the Coast Guard or NOAA. So I think there's ways, again, aside from the technology and some of the other work in terms of data collection, I think simple things like outreach, if the industry is engaged in those and it's coming from the right voice, they can be very impactful in terms of just general compliance with some of these measures that are in place.
I think that idea, I know when I'm traveling along the motorway and the flashing light comes up saying slow down, one, you do slow down, but two, you're more alert. So I like that idea, John. That is good. That's good. Yeah. Regulations. I'm getting questions here, sort of like who regulates whale protections? Is there a simple board that people can actually follow so that they know that this regulation is in place?
I think it depends on where you are. In the U.S., like Matt was mentioning, there are regulations in place to protect North Atlantic right whales. But, and then I just actually read a paper from Science that came out in November, Anna Nisi and her colleagues, and it's called Ship Collision Risk Threatens Whales Across the World's Oceans. And they actually combined for 4 different large whale species. They overlapped their distribution based on observation records with shipping AIS data to see where the overlap was. And they found that in the whale hotspots, less than 10% of that area had actual protections in place to prevent collisions with vessels. So I think part of it comes down again to the outreach. It's like there may not be, wherever you are, whatever country you're in, there may not be regulations yet to protect the whales. But do you wait until there's regulations in place? Or do you try to do like what we're trying to do and get the word out that people can be protecting them now? You don't have to wait till there's a law or a rule. And like John mentioned, some people don't like following the rules. So if they're being told by a regulator that they're not following the rules and they're in trouble, but yet a colleague tells them, hey, if you just slow down a little bit in this area here, you're going to protect your boat and your crew and your passengers and everything's good, and these whales too. That's just another way to kind of get at it. I think that's from a more of a human behavioral aspect. Right.
Thank you. I think if I have to, as we're coming to a close now, I'd like to say, if there's one bit of advice you could give the people listening in right now, because this is a community who care about whales, what would that advice be? I'm going to start with Matthew, and I give everyone a couple of minutes to think about that. Matthew, one-liner, what would you suggest today closing this out?
I'm going to use the same one-liner I use all the time, which is why not? There's possibilities to do things today that have a positive impact for whale conservation that cost you close to zero. You're already doing the things already. Simple observations. Those cost you nothing, and it has a huge value in helping to understand. So why not? Please do the things that you can do with close to zero effort.
Thank you. Vienna, what will you leave us with?
I would like to highlight that we really need to be more respectful, to elaborate a bit more on this, and to have more awareness that we are entering the whale's domain when we enter the ocean, and other animals, the life below water, the so famous life below water. So I think we should be more respectful from this point of view, because the human behavior could really avoid most of the problem we cause to the ocean. So more awareness, and on the other hand, also use more these little tools like the climate contribution. If you want to have a look, you can go also on the Water Revolution Foundation website to see how we do contribute to the ocean in a very positive way. So trying not to only to avoid the damages we do, that it's already a big deal, but also try to contribute in a positive way, because I'm an anthropologist as a background, so I know how much our mindset and our way to look and to relate to build the ecological, so to refresh the ecological relationship could be key, really, to tackle the challenge we are facing.
Thank you, Vienna. Amy, over to you. Final thoughts.
I would say more collaboration and communication, like we're doing today. But like I said, if you have a great idea and you have a way that's working, and you can communicate and share that with others, don't be afraid to do that, particularly within your community and across communities.
Thank you. John, final words.
Yeah, I think Amy kind of summed up my point. I think, engage in this issue, be willing to listen and work with anyone that has the shared interest of reducing mortality to these creatures. And if that's vessel strikes that we're talking about today, then let's work collectively to find ways that we can do that, because there are ways.
Thank you. I'd like to thank you all for joining me here today, both all the panelists here, and also everybody who's out there in the world watching in. I know there will be follow-up, will be links to opportunities for you to engage, our websites, and please, any more questions, you know how to get hold of us. But thank you, Matthew, for organizing this today.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.